Hi, and welcome to the Comics Experience Book Club for the month of, this is the September book, and our choice was Ghosts. Ghosts by Raina Telgemeier here. Raina, woo! Woo! And we have a full house today here at the store. Probably more people than we've had to one of these in I think any of them, right?
Yeah.
Right. So I'm Brian Hibbs, your host. This is Ben Friedman Hibbs, my lovely co-host, and of course we have the beautiful Raina here as our wonderful guest.
I brought the weather.
You brought the weather, you did. Rain for I love it. So I'm going to, normally I talk at these things a lot, but I'm going to try and talk as little as possible. And most of the questions to you guys, because I'm sure you guys. But I sort of want to start with just some basic stuff. Why comics? Why did you start in comics? Why are comics the greatest thing ever? Just why comics?
Do I get the mic?
Yeah, you can.
Before I tell you why comics, can we take a selfie? Okay, I like to do this at all of my events. So can we start with that? And Sheila Marie is going to actually take it for me. I'm going to give you my cup, Ben, and we're going to give my camera out, and Sheila Marie is going to go up on the stairs. And then I want to get everybody in the photo if possible. But that means that the coolest way to do these is if you have a book, hold your book up, and if you don't have a book, just like make yourself look super excited. I want you guys in it too. So yeah. If I don't do it at the beginning, it's sometimes I'll do it like this. Can we get everybody in?
You guys look so good. Woo! Nice.
All right. Thanks. Okay. With that important order of business out of the way. So why comics? I mean, I don't know if it matters, but since we're here, I'll tell you that I grew up right here in San Francisco, hometown, and my hometown paper was the San Francisco Chronicle. And I remember opening up the paper one morning because my parents read the paper every day and being like, oh, look, there's these comics things in here. And I started reading Calvin and Hobbes, and it just was funny. I was like, that was awesome. So I started reading For Better or For Worse, and I started reading Luann and Peanuts and Kathy and all of the other comic strips that were in the paper. And this would have been in 1986. So that was sort of like when Calvin and Hobbes was really hitting its stride. And I just fell in love. I fell in love with comics then and there, and then started drawing my own, and then started reading indie comics. And my dad's a comics fan too. And he was kind of a fan of like the underground stuff. And he used to subscribe to Whole Earth Catalog. And so he would find out about comics in there, and then he would buy them, and then he would read them with me. And so it was just something that was a part of my life from the time I was 9. And then it never stopped being a part of my life.
What is it that makes comics just the greatest medium of all time?
That's a really big question. I feel like we could volley this one back and forth between us. Comics are amazing. I think so. The first graphic novel that I read, and this was a book that my dad found out about in Whole Earth Catalog, was a book called Barefoot Gen, and it is by a guy named Keiji Nakazawa, and it was a manga that was written in Japan, and it was serialized in Shonen Jump magazine starting in the 1970s, and then it was translated into English in the mid 80s and distributed here. And it's the true story of the atomic bombing of Hiroshima, which is a ridiculously crazy subject matter to tackle in comics format. And my dad was like, so I know you like comics, Raina, and I'm just going to put this book here, and just, if you feel like reading it, we could maybe talk about it at some point. And I was kind of like, okay, whatever. And then he kept kind of encouraging me. And so I finished the book. And by the time I got 3/4 of the way into the story, I was enthralled, and I was, really into the characters and really into the storyline. It was riveting and really sad and scary. And then the bomb falls at the end of this first volume, and Gen's brother, sister, and father all die in the bomb, and he watches it happen. And I was just completely devastated. Like, I lost my mind. I was so upset. I was mad at my dad. It's like, Dad, that's not cool. Mad at the world, like the world is a horrible place. And also comics had betrayed me because I thought comics were awesome. I thought they were funny. I thought they were cute and something to distract me from my regular life every morning. But it was like that just exploded my entire worldview. And it was a comic that did that. So I just was like, wow, comics can do anything. They're so powerful. They can make you cry. They can make you laugh. They can make you think. They can make you feel things. And I've never had another medium do that in just that way. I mean, yes, novels are incredibly powerful, and journalism's powerful, and movies are powerful, and television's powerful. Like everything's powerful, but comics, you're so right there with the characters. You feel like you are the characters because with a movie, you're casting actors, or in animation, you have someone else's voice speaking the lines of the character, so you can't be that character. But a comic, you can just, you are there, you are in it, it is you. And so I guess empathy is the word I'm looking for here, that you can feel someone else's point of view so directly through comics. That is a long answer to your question, and I hope that was what you were looking for, because getting the thing off to a good start.
I agree with every word there. But, I mean, yeah, we're fine. I have a big voice, so so let's talk about craft just a teensy tiny bit. We usually spend a lot of time talking about how and when you create, but I just want to know, you draw everything by hand? You're on the computer? How do you work? What's your process?
My process is about 90% traditional, meaning I'm using paper and pencils and brushes and ink to create my work. And then once the work is actually finished, I scan it, and then I do my cleanup digitally. Like instead of using whiteout to correct my mistakes, I will do that in Photoshop. And then the coloring is put in through a computer, but I don't do my own coloring. There's a font based on my handwriting. So the letters that you see in all of the books are digital, although Smile is hand lettered. I did that comic so long ago that I actually wrote all the words by hand, but my writing was kind of sloppy. So I had to go in and like fix everything, and that took a really long time. So after that, we started using my font for all of my books. Yeah, so I mean, I have actual artwork in my home, and I used to sell some of it. I used to sell the Babysitters Club pages. I don't do that anymore, but I still own all of the work from all of my original books. So right now we're just trying to figure out what to do with it. I'm not going to sell it, but we might donate it to one of the cartoon museums in the country. I might keep it and donate it or auction it off at some point. We'll see. But it's a lot of stuff. It's a big pile of stuff in my apartment.
How long does it take you to do Ghost? Well, from start to finish, blank page at the beginning to final book rolling off the press. How long did it take you?
I mean, the word start is complicated because I started thinking about this project maybe 10 years ago. I just had these images in my head of these kids who lived in sort of a seaside town, and there was definitely some Halloween stuff going on, and some costumes, and some illness. There were a lot of the themes and ideas that are in this book came to me early, but I didn't have the details. I didn't know who the characters were. I didn't know a lot about their lives or their personalities. And so it wasn't until it was probably close to 2 years ago that I started working on this story in earnest. And so yeah, it takes about 2 years from start to finish when I really start working on a project full time, to write the script and then to create the art and then to do all the production work.
Do you do a traditional script? No.
Some cartoonists work more like a screenplay, where before they start drawing, they'll say, panel 1, the character does this thing, and then the character says this thing. I don't do that because my brain doesn't think without pictures. So to write it all out without doing little doodles wouldn't make any sense to me. So I work in thumbnails. I don't know how technical you guys all know about comics and how comics are created, but that means that I'm sort of sketching out every page just really, really loosely, and stick figures and word balloons, basically.
They're often called thumbnails because you usually draw the characters like the size of your thumb.
Right.
It's like really tiny little, just quick, like so you know where things are on a page.
No details. And if you want to see what that looks like, the 4th Babysitters Club book, Claudia and Mean Janine, has a little gallery in the end that shows you my entire process from start to finish. So you can see what a thumbnail looks like. You can see what the pencils, the inks, and the final stuff looks like. Yeah, so it seems like some of you guys might have them in your bags. That's awesome. You don't have to look right now, just for your reference for at some point. Yeah, whatever you want to do, I don't mind.
And then my next question would be, I think a lot of these guys out here want to do comics or do comics on their own. Anybody can do comics, right? Right?
I hope so.
Yeah. What would be your biggest piece of advice to someone wanting to do comics?
There's a few of them. I think that I always say to start small, meaning you might have this huge idea for this world and these characters and all the stories that you want to tell with them. But I started out doing short stories. I was doing 1-page stories and 2-page stories and 5-page stories, just kind of moments and interactions between characters. And that helped me learn the mechanics of comics. It helped me learn how to, write and how to stage interactions and all of the things that will go into long form storytelling are going to be true when you're doing short form. So start small, share your stuff. Don't keep it to yourself. I kept my comics to myself until I was in my 20s. So I wasn't really able to improve until I started showing my work to other people. And yeah, I'm sure other tips are going to come up today as we talk. Stat.
Yeah. So is there has your like speed in like drawing pages or even panels, has it gotten faster since when you first started writing books?
Have I gotten faster? Not really. I think I'm slower actually, because I was like naive before. I would just do whatever came to mind. Now I'm like, let me put some thought into it. But partly that's because I don't want to repeat myself. So I'm trying to think more carefully and planning out further in advance how I'm going to do things. I used to just do things, real quick and dirty. But it also depends on how detailed my work is. Like I used to draw panels with no backgrounds. I would just draw characters like hanging out in blank space. And that was fast. That was easy. Or if they were just like in a classroom, it would be like an indication of the desk or something. And now I'm like, let me see if I can draw a book that's set in a fake version of Half Moon Bay, which means that I have to go and look at photo reference. And then sometimes I go to the places just to sort of be there and feel what it's like. And then I try really hard to, create a composition within every single panel that's beautiful to look at. And then that means the page as a whole also needs to look beautiful. And so the artist in me is trying to top myself every single time I do a book. And that can be really intimidating. I'll say that.
Another one?
No, does anyone from the audience have a...
Cool, we'll take our first audience question. That's gonna run out. Nice.
On the first book, Smile, I'm pretty sure that was the first book, right? It said, was it true? How did it happen? I was told that it was true. How did it actually happen? Was a whole
Yeah. I think instead of running the mic out every time, I think we'll just repeat.
I can just repeat the questions. That's totally fine. So how did it really happen in Smile? Just the way I described it in the story. I was at a Girl Scout meeting one evening and I was going home. My friend's mom dropped me off and my friends were like, let's race to Raina's front door, which was kind of, I live at the end of this courtyard. And so my friends started running and I was like, hey, you're getting too far ahead of me, Kelly. So I like reached out and grabbed her jacket to try and stop her from getting so far ahead of me. But for some reason, yeah, you're doing the motion right there. Like it's so easy to pantomime. And that's actually how I work when I draw, is I sort of will get up out of my chair and pantomime a movement to try and draw it. So that's what happened was I literally fell and I hit my face. And my first thought was, oh my gosh, did I hurt my hands or my arms? Because I think as an artist, that's like your number one concern, is that your hands are not going to be okay. So my hands were fine. And I kind of brushed myself off. And then I was like, why is there this puddle of blood on the ground? Oh, I must have hit my face. Oh, I think my tooth is missing. Oh my gosh. And then it just kind of unfolded from there. So I tried as accurately as possible to capture those memories, but those memories are 20 years old. So I was like remembering them, but I was also sort of writing it. It's really hard to explain how I work when I write memoir, but I'm filling in certain details in my head as best as I can imagine that they happened. And that includes the way that I write the dialogue too. So yeah, it's a challenge, but it's a fun challenge.
Let's do a question from the internet.
Ooh.
If anybody who's out there watching, we know there's a bunch of you. Feel free to submit your questions, and we will get to however many we can. I don't think we're going to get to them all, though, because I already have 6 questions here and a whole room full of people. Ben, do you want to ask?
Yeah, so Keegan asks, would you do a sequel to Ghosts?
Would I do a sequel to Ghosts? It's hard to say. I like to write self-contained stories that don't need sequels because I like to feel really satisfied when I finish a book. But then, you know, if you read about this world and these characters and you like this world, you want more of it. But I don't currently have a sense of what the next story for these characters would be. So if I do write a sequel, it would probably take me a few years to think about it. There's no plans for a sequel to Ghosts right now, but the characters do still live in my head. So you never know.
Do you already have your next idea cooking?
Yes. Yes, I do. Do you want to know a little bit?
A little bit, yeah.
Okay. The next book is going to be another memoir, and it's going to be about me and my dad, and about a certain book that he gave me to read when I was 10.
I wonder what book that might be.
I don't know, but how that book changed my life. And so it's really going to be about my relationship with comics and the world. And just I don't know why he would ever know this. Today's my dad's birthday, so like I have to like shout out to him. It's I'll see him tomorrow, but he's still a huge part of my life. He's still my #1 fan and my #1 supporter. So it's really neat to be able to share this experience with him just all together. And I think writing a book about this will bring it home in a way that's going to feel really satisfying.
What's his name?
His name's Dennis.
Dennis. Everybody want to say happy birthday to Dennis? Happy birthday, Dennis!
Is this public on the internet? Oh, cool. Hi, Dad. Cool.
Question from the room. Yes, right in front.
What would you? I did a book report on Ghosts, and I was having a little bit of trouble. What is the main theme of Ghosts?
What is the main theme of Ghosts? What was your answer to that question in your book report? Conquering fears. That is the theme of Ghosts. You were absolutely right. Thank you. It's got a lot of themes. I mean, it's about fear, but it's also about life, and it's about embracing life while you can, because there's a character who's sick. She's not terminally ill. Maya has cystic fibrosis, which is not a disease that's going to kill you, but it is a disease that's going to make your life challenging. And it's got the expectancy for cystic fibrosis is just a little bit shorter than a healthy person, because it means that you get frequent lung infections and there's scar tissue that builds up inside of your lungs, and then you can't breathe as well. So a lot of people with cystic fibrosis end up needing lung transplants, or they need a breathing tube to, continue being healthy. This is not every kid that has it, but it's something that challenges your life. So, Kat and Maya are both contending with that reality. And how long is Maya going to be with us? We just don't know. So Maya's attitude is, let's go for it, man. Let's have a great time, and let's party, and let's dance, and let's enjoy ourselves. And Kat is her big sister, and she feels a real sense of protection towards her, and she's terrified. She's terrified of the idea that she might lose her. So it makes her cautious, it makes her anxious, and she's scared of what's lurking around every single corner. So the ghosts in the story are sort of a metaphor for fear, and learning to accept your fears and then get to know them a bit. And when you get to know your fears, sometimes they become less scary. So these are really big themes. These are not themes that I went into this book thinking, I'm going to write about fear and I'm going to write about acceptance of death. Like, all of these things were not on my mind. I just had characters. I just had a story I wanted to tell. And this book was not on my desk yet, but it was in my head when I lost a young cousin of mine. My cousin Sabina was 13 and she died of cancer. And I had to watch what her family went through with that experience. And this was a kid who was just a wonderful person. She was so bright. She was so alive. And she was always the one telling the rest of us not to be sad. So in a lot of ways, her spirit became Maya's spirit in the story. And I didn't expect that to happen. It was a surprise. But when it happened, I was just like, I don't want to write Sabina's story, but I need to write about death, and I need to write about how families cope with it. And that's where Kat comes from too, is just the reaction to that. And how do you deal with something like that? It is so hard. And people ask me a lot, I'm going to give myself my own question here. People often ask me, do you think about how kids are going to be able to handle a subject matter like that. I think kids are maybe smarter than adults a lot of the time. I think you guys know what's up. I think you guys are thinking about all these things too. And I think it's really hard to talk about this stuff, but stories are awesome because they give you kind of a way to talk about it and a way to think about it and the tools to start conversations sometimes. And because I actually experienced a child dying, you know, I was like, what would I want to talk to Sabina about, and how would I want to listen to her story from her point of view? So these are the things that I think about when I'm writing in a really like back of my head kind of way. And then they go into stories, and then I get to go up on stage and talk about it. And I get very emotional when I talk about it. But I love that. I love being able to talk like deeply with people about my work. It's awesome. Yeah. Whoa.
Yeah.
So I hope you got an A on your book report.
Let me sidebar there. Was there a moment when you were writing the story that you thought that she might die in the story?
Yes.
Because I was scared. There was a point where, and as an adult, you know, I was like, oh, we're done here. So
there was. I mean, this story went through a lot of revisions and a lot of drafts. There was a draft where Maya died, and Kat actually had to go into the underworld to save her. There was a draft. It wasn't a written draft, but it was a theoretical draft where Carlos was a ghost, and where he was going to be a ghost the whole time, and nobody knew it, and like Kat was the only one who could see him. But then it ended up being Carlos's uncle, who was the ghost in the story, that got to know the characters the best. And his uncle died when he was a little boy, so his ghost is a child. But you don't know that till the end of the story. So that was almost like an 11th hour rewrite that Jose, who's the ghost uncle, became a child in the story. Yeah, so there were definitely some times when I was like, whoa, this is getting really heavy, and I don't know if this is the direction I want to go with it. And ultimately, I just had to trust that I was going in the right direction. But I also had my editors there to sort of help me through the process. But that's why writing can take a long time, is you're like, what if I did this? What if I did that? This is not a true story, so I could do whatever I want with it. And that is very intimidating.
Another internet question, I think?
Yeah. So Sarah asks, how do you decide on Day of the Dead?
How does one decide on Day of the Dead? I've known about Day of the Dead because I lived in San Francisco my whole life. And so when you go down to like the Mission and you see all of the murals on the walls of the buildings, you know, there's a lot of skeletons and sugar skulls and calaveras images. So I've always been curious about them. And when I learned more about how death is celebrated in Mexico and in other countries around the world, and realized that it's more about the joy of the spirits that you've lost than about mourning them, I was like, wow, that's what I want for the people that I've lost in my life. I want to celebrate them and feel like they're still with me somehow. So Day of the Dead has all of those themes in it. And my first Day of the Dead celebration that I attended was actually last year's, right here in San Francisco. And I waited until I had been to the celebration to draw the final scene in the book. I didn't want to actually put it into the story until I had seen it for myself. And it wasn't quite like I expected it to be. It was much more quiet, but also happier than I expected. And it was something that everybody shared, because it was, you know, thousands of people all in the Mission District, all at Garfield Park, sort of experiencing the altars and the labyrinths and stuff. And it was also just happy, but it was really interesting. It was like we shared it, but everybody kind of brings their own piece to that experience. Yeah,
That's you there.
that's me. That's me last year at the Festival of Altars. Yeah.
Very good. Audience? Yes.
What's my favorite graphic novel that I've ever read? Whoa. I have a favorite series that's also a manga from Japan. It's called Yotsuba. It's by Kiyohiko Azuma. Yeah, he created this character who's like, is she 5 or is she 6? I think she's like 6 years old, and she's just this little girl, and she's just weird. That's like the whole elevator pitch right there. is she's weird in the sense that she doesn't know anything or like what the world's all about. So she walks into a building and the air conditioning is on and she's like, what is that crazy thing that is making it cold in here? And then she like finds a squirt gun in her neighbor's house and she turns into a gangster and she starts like squirting everybody with it. And she just, I don't know, she just interacts with the world in this way that I think is so funny. Do we have a copy of it here to like hold? Okay, cool. Well, I mean, I talk about it a lot. We don't always have one on hand, but you're a comic book store, so it's good to be here. Yeah, so that's my favorite comic book series. I love it. Another audience question?
Yes.
What is your favorite character out of all of the books?
Oh my gosh, what is my favorite character out of all of the books that I have made? I have two. One of them is Amara, because she and I are totally different. And when you put those two characters in a room together, me and my sister, it's like oil and water. And it's really fun to see characters who are different from each other interact. So I had a lot of fun like juxtaposing she and I. There we go. Yay. That's Yotsuba.
This is also chapter 2 in volume 2, Revenge. That's when she's the gangster with her. It's my favorite.
It's so funny. Yeah, so check these books out too. And then I love Maya. I love Maya from Ghosts. I mentioned that she's kind of inspired by my cousin Sabina, but she's also inspired by like every excited kid I have ever met. The ones who like bounce into the room and they're just like, hi, oh my gosh, I'm Maya. I'm going to give you a hug right now. And you're like, whoa, who is this person? I've never met you before. But she's just so fun. She's so vibrant. And she's always kind of up to something. So I like drawing her a lot too.
Let's jump back to the internet, perhaps.
Do you ever think books will be more?
No. Do you think your books
Oh, do you think your books will be more
made
into movies?
There you go. From Sarah. Hi, Sarah.
Hi, Sarah. That's a great question. I have no idea because I don't make movies. So if someone else wants to make a movie out of my books, that is totally a possibility. They will have to pay me money, which is, and that's just how it works. Someone in Hollywood options stories and then turns them into films. So a studio would have to option the right to make a film, and then they would have to find a director, producer, actors, and all that stuff. It's a whole process. It's a process that I am not involved with at all, except that I need to give or sign away the rights. So it has not happened yet. If it does, I promise you, I will tell you. You guys will be the first to know. I will put it on my website. Everybody will hear about it. But even if a book gets optioned to be made into a film, it usually takes 2, 3, 4 years before the film is made. So yeah.
I'm actually surprised that your books haven't been optioned yet. I would have thought for sure that you'd have people tripping over themselves trying to hand you bags of money.
It's complicated. So
okay. We'll leave it at that. Another question. We've got anything from the back of the room, maybe, since there you go.
When you made those, did you think that it's kind of hard, but like Kat and Maya, like they have a weird relationship, and how do you like think of how all this things should play out?
So she says that Kat and Maya have a weird relationship. Totally true. And how did I think that all the scenes would play out? Like, how did I write those two characters? I started with kind of some building blocks, which is that Maya is a kid who has a disease and she's not healthy. And her sister is totally healthy, but she's afraid of everything. So I started thinking about what that would be like for Kat. And I'm somebody who does suffer from anxiety myself, and I'm a little bit of a hypochondriac, which means I'm afraid of illness. And so I just started thinking how I would react if somebody I really cared about was not well. And like I said, Maya's kind of inspired by like every excited kid I've ever met in my life. So how do I respond to that? So Kat's really me. Kat is my sort of proxy in this story, and she thinks more like I do than any of the other characters in the book. And so her reactions to things are the way that I would react to things. And then, yeah, I don't even know like where Maya's dialogue and her character come from. They just sort of they sort of took over. Like she kind of started writing herself. It's this thing that happens when you're writing sometimes, is that you almost feel like you're being pulled along and you don't know where it's going, but then things just start happening and you're like, whoa, I'm the writer, so I better just like keep chasing after this thing. I describe it sometimes as falling down a rabbit hole, and you just have to keep on chasing the rabbits and just see where things go. And until I write the last page, a lot of times I don't know where it's going either. And it's really exciting. When I'm in that zone, when I'm writing, I'm like a hermit. I never leave my house. I have to order delivery for every single meal, and I don't like take showers, and I barely sleep because I'm so excited by my story. I'm living inside of it, and I am a wreck. Like no one should ever see me because I don't take showers during that. Like I turn into like a crazy writer person when I'm doing that. But then when it's done, I'm just like, oh my gosh, I feel so good right now, and I'm exhausted too. But when that happens, when I have that experience and I feel all those things, that's when I know like I've made something that I'm going to be proud of. So yeah, I don't know. Have you ever written a story with 2 characters in it before? She's kind of going like this. It's not easy. It's really difficult, but the more you do it, the better you get at it.
So, may I ask what happened to your wrist?
Yes. So what happened to my wrist is that I have been on book tour for the last 6 weeks, and my guesstimate is that I have signed 20,000 books. Should I say that number again? 20,000 books in 6 weeks. Yes, there was one day, in fact, I was at a festival called the National Book Festival. It's in Washington, D.C. This is me humble bragging, by the way. And I had a signing line that was 1,700 people. And I had 70 minutes to sign all of their books. And I had a little staff of 10 people. Sheila Marie was one of those people. And one person was putting the book under my hand. Another person was taking it out from under my hand. Somebody else was going, okay, if you want a photo, stand over there. It was like this crazy production that we all kind of made happen. And my job was to go, hi, thank you. Oh my gosh, it's nice to meet you. Awesome. Like, and I signed them all in that time. And then I was like, oh man, what did I just do? So the brace is not an injury. It just keeps things more stable. And if I don't wear the brace, I would be toast. But yeah, so I've been doing something along those lines, not to that scale, but I've been on tour for 7 weeks. So almost every day I sign hundreds and hundreds of books. So I wear a brace. I'm done in a week. A week from now, I will have my last event. So pretty cool.
Neil Gaiman describes it as the endless parade of belt buckles.
Yeah, that's what you're still, but I work with kids.
That's true.
So
That's true. You
endless
actually
parade of
right.
like, if you guys have like a cool zipper or something, like that's what I see. Yeah.
That's fine. Another question from the room? All the way in the back.
How did I come up with the name Ghosts? Well, I pigeonholed myself a long time ago by writing a book called Smile. And I was the one that came up with the title for that book because I thought it was ironic to have a book about not wanting to smile called Smile. And because when you're going through orthodontia and braces and headgear and surgery and you feel really self-conscious and people are constantly saying things like, why don't you smile? You're just like, oh, that's the last thing I want to do. So I had this 1-word title for Smile. And then I wrote drama. And I wanted to call it something like Kelly Chronicles or Stage Crew Confidential or something. And my editors were like, how about drama? And I was like, what? And they liked the idea of that 1-word title so much. So usually I don't have a title until really late in the game. Like I don't have a title for my next book that I'm working on. But, 10 months from now or something, my editors are probably going to email me with like the most obvious answer. And I'm going to go, no. And they're going to go, yep. And so that's how Ghosts was. I was like, that is so obvious. They were like, trust us. So that's how I came up with the title for Ghosts. No joke.
Anyone else?
I was wondering, what book are you going to publish next?
What
Besides that book about that?
what book am I going to publish after that? That's a great question. But that's going to be 4 years from now. So I don't always think that far down the line. But I mean, I have ideas, but I haven't started with the development process on those ideas yet. I know that I want to try lots of different things and that I want to try different genres, but that I also have more stories about my life that I want to tell. So I don't know. The next one's going to be a memoir, and then maybe after that I'll do something else that's fiction.
You've become obviously a children's author. Was that your intention going into writing it originally? Was you're writing for kids, or were you just writing memoir and it turned out that kids really liked your story?
I
Makes sense? Was that a good-
I think that's what happened. I started writing journal comics when I was 11. So I was keeping a diary, but instead of just writing in my diary, I was drawing in it every day. And then I started sort of turning those entries into comics. And that's what I never showed anybody because it was really personal. And then in college, I started writing short stories about my life, but it was like my past life. Like, oh, a short story about my first cup of tea when I was 7 years old, and a short story about, like a time that my dad, we lived in the city, he would drive us out to the golf course that's in, where is it? Right along the highway, in Highway 280. Where the golf course meets like the Crystal Springs Reservoir.
Okay.
So we'd go up there like early in the morning and we'd see deer. And that was like the biggest deal. So I wrote a short story about that. And I don't know, I just started doing that a lot. And this was when I was self-publishing my mini comics and I was taking them to like Ape, to sell them and stuff. And people were just responding to that stuff. They were responding to my childhood stories way more than they were responding to the stories about my regular life in New York City with my friends and my college and stuff. So I started focusing on those. I amassed a bunch of short stories. And then I was like, I have this big story I want to tell about my childhood and about my teeth. I'm just going to start making it. I had no idea who was going to read it. It was just my friends. My friends were grown-ups. A couple of their kids read it. I had maybe like 200 readers for Smile. I was putting it up on the web. People were reading it week to week. I was getting a little bit of feedback, but it wasn't kids. It was mostly grown-ups. And then Scholastic looked at it and said, hey, this is a book for kids. And I was like, really? Okay, I guess you guys know what you're doing. Scholastic, children's publisher, 90 years in the making. They know what's up, and they were 100% right. And I'm really grateful because my readership jumped from, 200 to like 2 million or something, which was awesome. And now I love that even though it takes place in like the late 80s and early 90s, kids are like, this is my childhood. This is my story too. And that's amazing. I think it worked out. That's the best I can say.
And do you, I guess the question is, are you in that creative mode now? Is it just where you are? Like, do you think that you would do something that's aimed at adults, or are you just a children's author now?
I don't know. I mean, I have stories for stuff that's happened to me after, I was 16 that at some point I might want to tell, but I don't know if I could tell those stories for Scholastic. Or I don't know if I could tell those stories about my life. I might have to fictionalize some stuff, or, just I think the older you get, the more you start looking at themes and the more you start looking at narrative arcs and the people that and sort of applying life lessons to characters. So a lot of what Kat goes through in Ghosts is stuff I've dealt with as an adult, but I was able to channel it through an 11-year-old character. So, it is anybody's guess, like where my career is going to go in the next 10 years and what types of stories I'm going to write. But I love working with Scholastic so much. They are amazing, and they have given me such a great platform to tell stories and a great audience to tell stories too. And I love it. So right now I can't imagine doing like dirty grown-up stories, but maybe when I'm 60, I'll be like, I really want to write about my 30s. So who knows?
All right, audience, you got another one? Yes, right over here.
I did not celebrate Day of the Dead when I was a kid because it was not celebrated widely when I was a kid. I really did not celebrate it until recently. But I don't know, my family didn't celebrate it either. Like I think you celebrate whatever is around you and whatever the culture that you grow up with is. And again, because there is so much Mexican and Mexican American culture in San Francisco, I feel like that was in some ways a part of my childhood, but Day of the Dead specifically was not until I was a little bit older. Have you ever celebrated it? Oh, in your school? That's really cool. I love that schools celebrate it.
There was another question there in the back.
Do you have any recommendations for comics that we might like?
Recommendations for comics that you guys might like. That is an awesome question. You mean besides Yotsuba, right? I really like books that are about real characters. Like even when I was a kid and I was reading prose, I loved books like the Ramona series. I loved Judy Blume's work. I loved Beverly Cleary's work and Laura Ingalls Wilder's work. So I loved reading about kids who were like me. So I still like reading about kids who are like me. So like the book Roller Girl, I think is outstanding. And I really like the book Sunny Side Up by Jenny and Matt Holm. There's a book called Awkward by Svetlana Chmakova. I know she did a book club here back in, was it a year ago? No. A few months ago. Okay. Svetlana is awesome and her work is so funny. So her book Awkward is great. So let's see what else. I have like a whole list on my website, and of course it always goes right out of my head when people ask me that question. But do you have a book that you can recommend? Bee and Puppycat. Yes. Yes, and that's based on the cartoon, right? I actually know the lady that created Bee and Puppycat. Natasha Allegri. Yeah, she used to work on Adventure Time too. And then she started Bee and Puppycat. But she and I know each other because we both used to make comics. And we both used to be in like the same circle of people that were making comics on the internet. So that's really cool that you suggested that.
And I do know that he does time too, because I've been watching it lately, and once it's over, like it shows all the stuff once it's over, you know. And then I read it, and I'm like, oh my god, Natasha's Allegri. Natasha Allegri.
You totally were.
I was like really excited.
Do you know that she also created Fionna and Cake for Adventure Time, the like gender swap version of the characters? Yeah, the Adventure Time comics are also really good, as so are the Fionna and Cake graphic novels that they've made. The Marceline and the Scream Queens comic by Meredith Grand was awesome. A lot of the stuff that Boom Studios makes, like the Lumberjanes, amazing. There are so many great comics being published right now. Like you guys have no idea what it was like before you were all born, but I mean, things have really changed in the last 10 years. So much. And it's so cool to be a part of that.
Yeah. I opened up this store in 1989, so that's 27 years ago. It's a really long time ago. When I first opened the store, there were about 10, maybe 15 graphic novels that were in print.
Graphic novels, period.
Yeah. And that was it. There were 15. So people would come, oh, I heard about this mouse thing. And you'd be like, here's Mouse. And they go, oh, that was great. Now what's next? And here's 10 things you can buy. And so, yeah, it was a little hard. It was a little hard back then.
Yes, it was.
Now there's an infinite number of things. I like it much better now.
Sorry.
Yeah. So Sarah.
No, that's the code.
Sarah from the internet asks, if you could change one thing in your books, what would it be?
If I could change one thing in my books, what would it be? Oh, that main character, Raina. She's got to go. I don't know. I try not to live with regrets. Like I feel like each book represents a period in my life. Each book represents, like a 2-year time that I was working on it. So it's me and who I was back then. Smile is me between the years of 2004 and 2009. And yes, in case I didn't mention it, Smile took me 5 years to create. And I created the entire Babysitter's Club graphic novel series within that time. So those two projects happened side by side. And I think from the beginning of Smile to the end, you can actually see my growth as an artist. You can see my growth as a storyteller. And there are so many things about the beginning of Smile that I would like to go back and change and make better. Like drawings I don't think are good enough, and ways that I told the story that I would like to improve. but I don't want to change them because they represent who I was then. There's one line in Sisters where my parents have like a fight towards the end of the book when we're at the airport, and my mom says to my dad, like, you should go home and you should grind your coffee as early in the morning as possible. And like she like insults my dad kind of, and then they kind of, it's this tension that's created. I wish that I had included within that outburst from my mom and eat cheese for every meal, because I set that up earlier in the book that my dad likes to eat cheese for every meal. Happy birthday, Dad. And so I wish that I had called back to that line in that scene, because it would have been, that's how writing works. Like you try and play off of things, and you play off of words and moments and things later on in the story. So I wish I had played that off. So that is the one regret that I have. Nothing else.
Let's actually talk about the babysitter books for a second here. What's the difference for you as a cartoonist for adapting somebody else's work versus coming up with your own thing? Is it easier? Is it harder? It's probably both, depending on what it is.
Well, I started the Babysitters Club books in 2004 and worked on those for 4 years, and I was not a graphic novelist yet. I had never written or drawn a graphic novel. I started writing Smile at the same time. So I didn't even know if I could write a long form story in 2004, but having the stories from the Babysitters Club books already existing gave me the confidence to just say, you know what, all I have to do is draw this. It's going to be long. It's going to take a while, but it's going to happen. It's all laid out for me. But I still had to figure out how to write the adaptation. So how do you pull the dialogue from the prose and put it into comics in a way that makes sense? And how do you show instead of tell? So these are just decisions that you make, and there's some sort of mental editing that happens. But the thing about the Babysitters Club is that those were stories that I started reading when I was 9 years old, which is the same period in my life that I'm writing about anyway. And that means that they're almost like my own memories. The Babysitters Club stories are so personal to me because I read them at that moment in my life when all stories mattered so much, that I feel like Christy's memories are almost my own. I can visualize the memories in my head the way I can see my own stories in my head. So adapting the Babysitters Club, going back to those books to read them and start the adaptations, I was like, it's like reading my own diary. I see them so clearly. And what was interesting was that I really identified with Christy when I was young because she's a tomboy. I looked like her. I was a shy kid, but I was really good at sticking my foot in my mouth. I had a lot of big ideas and didn't really know how to communicate them. So in my head, I was the most like Christy. And I really liked Dawn too, because she was from California and she was awesome. But when I started working on the graphic novels, I found ways to identify with all of the main characters. And I was really surprised that the character that I felt the most empathy toward, and had never considered this before, was Stacy McGill, who's, of course, she moves to Stony Brook from New York City, and she's super cool, and all the other characters think that she's just like the prettiest, most glamorous girl ever, and she's the one that has diabetes and is sort of coping with that. But I realized when I was working on the adaptation that Stacy, at least to me, is the most insecure of all the characters. She's in some ways the youngest. Just at heart, she's the only one that still sleeps with a teddy bear. And I sleep with the teddy bear too to this day. So I was like, wow, Stacy's not what everybody thinks she is. And that makes it really hard for her. So I found myself relating to her character in a way that I never had before when I was reading those books as a kid. And I had a ton of compassion for her. And I think, I don't know, it just opened my eyes to like how different characters interact with the world. So I think that was a real learning experience to work on that book. So I mean, I was adapting a pre-existing series. I got to meet the author, who was one of my heroes. I think working on that series made me an infinitely better cartoonist and storyteller. And by the time I was done with that series, I was like, now I am confident that I can write long form stories and do fiction and go in different directions. So between Smile and BSC, I feel like I was given all the tools that I needed to be a cartoonist working for this audience. Yeah. I really like long answers this morning. I hope that's okay. Yeah.
I was wondering, would you have been writing
Would I be writing comics and graphic novels today if I had not knocked out my 2 front teeth? Let's see. I started reading comics when I was 9. I started drawing comics when I was 10, and I knocked out my 2 front teeth when I was 11. So chances are yes. Would I have written Smile if I hadn't knocked out my 2 front teeth? Absolutely not. Do I wish that I had not knocked out my 2 front teeth when I was a kid? Absolutely. But also no, because it made me, in a lot of ways, it made me who I am. It made me think about people that are going through things and like how they feel and how I felt and how I can relate to them. And so I don't think I'd be the same person, and I might not be telling the same kinds of stories, but it's impossible to say. That is totally speculative question. You have a question? Kind of. So your question is, I wrote Smile and Sisters and then I wrote Ghosts, and like, was that sort of the process of getting to a point where I could tell stories about other characters besides myself? Kind of. Yeah. I mean, I actually wrote drama in between Smile and Sisters. And after Smile, it's kind of like you guys today. You're like, are you going to write a sequel to Ghosts? Everybody wanted me to write a sequel to Smile. And I was like, nah, no, I'll never do that. Definitely not. Oh no, the story's over. I'm never going to write a sequel to Smile. So I wrote drama, and people were like, and when are you going to write a sequel to Smile? And I was like, oh my gosh, really? But I realized that sequel was the wrong word, and that's what was tripping me up. I like companion better when I talk about sisters, because you can read them in either order. It's not about what happened next. It's just like more stories about my life. But I mean, I had written 3 books already, 2 memoirs and 1 fictional, before I was ready to tackle Ghosts. And even though Ghosts has existed in my head since before Smile was written, I feel like that book could not have existed until recently. It just couldn't have, or it could have, but it would have been a totally different book. So yeah, like I said, these books sort of represent who I am and where I am in my life. So I think Smile Sisters led me to Ghosts in some ways, and it'll lead me to what's next after that. What I liked about Day of the Dead, Dia de los Muertos. So like when I went to the celebration in San Francisco last year, I went with a really good friend of mine who, and this is personal, so I feel a little bit weird telling his story as a juxtaposition to my own. But could we close the door maybe? It's just kind of noisy and it's hard for me to, thank you. My friend lost his mother when he was young, and so it was something that he really, really personally connected with. It had made him feel closer to her spirit. And this was not something that happened when we were together, but he told me that the first time he went to the celebration, which was, I think, 10 years ago, he brought with him a watch that she had given to him before she passed away. And he had had that watch, and he had always felt like he had never given her what he felt she deserved before she died. And so he had this watch, he felt all this guilt, he felt all this sadness, and then he brought the watch with him to his first Day of the Dead celebration, and he wasn't sure what he was going to do with it, but then he ended up placing it on one of the altars, and he doesn't know what happened after that. Like, he doesn't know where it is now, he doesn't know who has the watch or where it is, but he said that he just felt this overwhelming sense of relief. And I know it's really sad, but it was so beautiful. And so I got to go with him to this celebration, and we talked about her, and we talked about Sabina, and we talked about, you know, a couple of other friends of mine that have passed away in the last few years, grown-ups and children. And we both processed this loss in a way that was so meaningful, and I couldn't really put it into words. And so I went home after this experience, and I stayed up all night just thinking about it and knowing that I had to put it in this book somehow. So I didn't want to put his experiences in the book. I didn't want to put my exact experiences in the book. I wanted to put Kat's experiences into the book and let her have her own experience with it. But I had to wait. I couldn't do it right away. I had to wait about a week before I was ready to put that into the story, because I wanted to live with my own memories for so long. It was such a special night. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, it's so overwhelming to talk about it. I mean, I lost my own grandmother a few years ago too, and she lived until she was 96. and I felt so lucky to have her that long. But she lost her. She had dementia, so we weren't really with her completely for quite a while. She had some strokes too when she was in her 80s. So, but we got to stay with her for a really long time. So the grandma character in Ghosts, it's not Kat's grandma, but she sort of becomes her spiritual grandma for a little while in the story. And I think that there's definitely some of my grandmother in that character too. And just I think I've had this question from a few people, like, the ghosts speak Spanish and the characters in the story don't speak Spanish. And I was thinking a lot based on some of my friends and relatives who are second, third, fourth generation Mexican and Puerto Rican and Dominican, and they don't speak Spanish either. And I was really interested in why that happens and how, like, generations of people start to lose culture. And so I wanted to have the ghosts speak a different language than the people, but through the course of the story, they sort of start to understand each other. And some of it is through gesture, some of it is through just sitting together and like speaking and like pointing. Like the grandma ghost tells Kat that she has a beautiful spirit. And Kat doesn't understand what she's saying, but grandma ghost goes, espiritu, espiritu. And she points at her chest and Kat goes, my spirit? Oh, and so they understand each other. And so I loved that. I loved the idea of like being able to communicate with the dead and using language as a metaphor for that. And I tried to learn Spanish when I was a kid, and they teach it to you in school, and I didn't learn, but then I went to Mexico myself and was able to remember some of it and like communicate with people and was like, wow, I actually got it. That's cool. So this is not something I've really talked about a lot. It's not something that's in the story specifically, but this all went into the making of the story for sure. And thank you for asking that. It's really nice to be able to talk about it, but oh, that's cool. We should talk more about that later. Thanks.
Almost out of time, though.
Okay.
We're getting really close. We have room for maybe one or two more questions. I saw your hand up, but was there anyone who didn't ask a question already? Over here. We'll get to you too. Go ahead.
What made me think to put Carlos in the book? Carlos is like every obnoxious boy I've ever encountered in my life. He's like a really good guy, but he likes to play with people a little bit. So he's kind of like a trickster character where he acts like he's all spooky and like he knows all this stuff to haunt you, but really he's just trying to kind of bring everybody closer together. And he's inspired by many different people, but his musical side is inspired by a good friend of mine from high school who wasn't really good at expressing his feelings, but he would play music and it was really beautiful. So I felt like, wow, I almost understand this person, even though I don't know how to talk to him about stuff all the time. So yeah, he's lots of different things. I like Carlos a lot too. I think he's cute. If I were Kat. Any last one?
You, because as a birthday girl, you can.
Aw, happy birthday.
She's the one who came from Reno.
Oh my gosh, happy birthday. That's awesome. How did I come up with drama? So when I was in middle school, I was in all of the drama clubs and all the school musicals and stuff. I went to Lowell, by the way. I don't know if we have any Lowellites in the house. Hey! Every time I'm in San Francisco, I always meet a few. Lowell is an academic magnet school, so we focus more on the college stuff and the AP courses and the smarts, but they also had a really awesome theater program. So I met tons of awesome people. I would always try out. I would never get cast as any leading roles. I'd always be part of the ensemble, which is like the group of kids who's in the background singing like 2 lines from each song. But it was super fun, and I spent a lot of time backstage just observing what was going on around. And I met the best people. And I met these 2 gay twin Filipino brothers named Jake and Jeff. They're like the best people in the universe. And so I've been friends with them since I was 16. And we're still really good friends to this day. And I always wanted to tell a story about us, but I was like, I don't think I want to make it about Raina, Jake, and Jeff. I think I'd rather make it about fictional characters. So I wrote that story about my high school experiences. and fictionalized it. And then Scholastic was there to suggest that maybe I make it about middle schoolers instead of high schoolers. So I aged it down, I rewrote it a little bit, and then it became drama. Yeah. And it's that one's really about friendship and about figuring out who you are and then supporting your friends for who they are. So that's another thing where I didn't know the theme of that book until it was all written. And then I was like, oh, look at that. How convenient. Themes.
All right, so I'm going to try this last question.
Am I going to cry?
No, I don't know. I hope not. I hope not. I don't want to make you cry.
Too late.
So you've been doing a lot of tours. You've been doing a lot of press, a lot of publicity. Is there a question that you haven't been asked yet that you would like to be asked about ghosts?
Oh man.
You can say no. That's fine.
There's tons of questions that people could or have not or I wish would ask me about ghosts, but none of them are coming to mind right now. So I feel like anything anybody would like to ask me about ghosts, go for it. And I will do my best. There are Easter eggs in all of my books. So people often notice that me and my sister are on the very first page in drama. We're going into the little theater with our mom, getting our tickets scanned. Almost all of my characters are in the backgrounds of all of my books. So I'm in Ghosts, and so are the Babysitters Club members, and so are Callie and Liz. Everybody's at the party. Some of my friends are in the backgrounds in the fall festival scene in the middle of the story. I had two amazing assistants while I was working on that book, production assistants who would come into my studio and help me scan stuff and like clean stuff up and get it all ready for press. And so my two assistants are both in the story. So I always have Easter eggs going on. And I also put in every single one of my books a spoiler for the next book. And I won't tell people what it is until after the fact. But if you look in Sisters, in the very last scene, the characters go and get their car fixed. And they go to Katrina's auto repair. And then Katrina, of course, is the main character in Ghosts. So no one would ever have known that before Ghosts came out. But there's one reference to what will be my next book in Ghosts. So I always do that.
And you guys know what the next book is, so that'll give you something to look for.
It might. I drop tiny little hints, but I'm not going to tell you what it is.
All right. Well, her hand is up, and even though I said it was the last question, I'm going to give her one. I'm going to be super nice to you. And what's your question?
Was I inspired by any people to make the Ghosts in Ghosts?
Do the ghosts represent people?
Did the ghosts represent any people? Like I said, the grandma ghost kind of represents my own grandmother. She represents a few grandmas that I've met in my life, a few really wonderful ladies. And then the character of Uncle Jose, he's kind of like Maya, where he's just a combination of like every overjoyed kid I have ever met in my life. Carlos is kind of inspired by my friend's son, but not really. Like I met her son one day and he's wearing this really cool little outfit and he's just like, hey, like he had this kind of swagger about him. And even though he's a lot younger than Carlos, I was just like, what is this kid going to be like when he's a few years older? And so, yeah, but that's not a ghost. Sorry. I'm just thinking of all the characters in the story. Yeah, you don't get to know that many of the ghosts very well. They're kind of side characters until the very end, and then you start to get to know a few of them. There's a few. Oh, here's a good one for you. Everybody's head just went up when I said that. So speaking of like putting characters in the back of my books, the Babysitters Club are all attending the Dia de los Muertos celebration at the end of the story. They're in there. It's very subtle, but in that scene, and it's just in one picture, Claudia and Stacy are their own thing. They are oblivious to everything that's going on. Marianne is looking right into the eyes of a ghost, a little blobby ghost. She's looking right at a ghost. And so in my head, that's Marianne's mom. Yeah. And Christy and Dawn notice it because they're her two best friends. They're tuned into it. And I'm crying again.
Perfect. That's a perfect place to end it. End on a tear. I love it. I wanna thank everybody for coming out on this rainy day. I want to thank Raina for being our guest here. She's so fantastic, and you're talented. And I hope you create a new book every couple of years for the every 2 years for the next 100. All right, that's what I want. So, so thank you all for coming. Well, I just remind you that we do this. We do, and it's usually not this big, but we do this every single month with a book every month. If you're watching at home on the internet, you can go to www.graphicnovelclub.com, and there's a tab there for the Kids Club, and we invite you to join and be a part of it and ask questions. And we hope everybody had a great time. And we're gonna have everybody go out now, and we'll reset the store, and then we'll bring you all back in for a signing. So just give us a second here while we close down the show, and Jordan will tell me that we're done. And